This gumball represents the 1 million legal immigrants that the United States has taken every year on average since 1990. Now, who in the world deserves our humanitarian compassion? The World Bank has one measure of the desperately poor of the world. They make less than $2 a day. And how many people make less than $2 a day in the world? Let's start with Africa. In Africa alone, there are 650 million people who make less than $2 a day. 650 million. And in India, another 890 million people, desperately poor. China adds another 480 million people, making less than $2 a day. And unfortunately, the rest of Asia has a heartbreaking 810 million people who the World Bank says make less than $2 a day. And finally, there's 105 million of Latin America's population that are desperately poor. All told, the World Bank says there are 3 billion people in the world, 3 billion people who are desperately poor, making less than $2 a day. That's 3,000 gumballs. And every year, we take 1 million and suggest that we've somehow made a humanitarian difference. Of course, we don't pull our immigrants from these desperately poor populations, do we? These people are too poor, too sick, too disconnected to make it here as immigrants. We tend to pull our immigrants out of the better off poor of the world. And Mexico tends to define the type of immigrant that we bring here because the plurality of people come from Mexico. And Mexico is poor. How many people in the world live in countries that have average incomes lower than that of Mexico? And the World Bank tells us that that number is these 3 billion plus another 2.6 billion people. 5.6 billion people in the world who live in countries with average incomes below that of Mexico. That's 5,600 gumballs. And so what is it that the elites are telling us? They're telling us that when we take this 1 million immigrants, that we somehow or another are tackling world poverty.
There is nothing wrong with your screen. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling the messaging in this transmission. We will tell you the topics you may speak about. We will remove any speech we deem unfit. We will identify and protect you from all that is evil. You need only put your full trust in us. We are the government, and we are here to help.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to The Tank. I'm Jack.
And I'm George. And we've got some excellent stuff for you guys today. Some updates on the Convention of States. We also have excellent reporting on the immigration crisis right now. And then lastly, we got some Fauci emails to go through. Of course, we couldn't miss the Fauci emails, so we'll cover that as well. Get ready to jump in the tank. It's going to be a fun ride.
Here we go. Okay, so today's update on Article 5 has to do with Nebraska. George has been tracking the activity, and I'll turn it over to him right now to share that with you.
Yeah, so we got some great news in Nebraska this past week or so. Nebraska, their legislation was sort of shelved, which is the case with a lot of these. If you've been to the website and you've looked at state by state with the ones that have pending legislation or legislation coming, aside from the 15 that already signed on, the ones that still have stuff pending, a lot of them have it shelved or it's stuck in committee, or one state calls it, pushed to the 41st day and there's only 40 days of their legislature. So all those things have been going on. And in Nebraska, we kind of thought it was going to be the same story. And it was Senator Mike Flood who resurrected the bill, called for a suspension of the rules. The rules were keeping the bill on the shelf. That did pass. He gave an excellent speech in the Senate. It did pass, which means the bill came back up. And to top that off, they weren't done yet. They actually got it past committee that same day. So the bill is not only back, but it's alive and it's ready to go to the Senate, to the full floor and come out of committee. So the House and Senate in January are going to vote on it up or down. So it's time for people in Nebraska to get fired up. This is the time to get in there, get on your legislatures, make sure, or your legislators, make sure that you're getting fired up. Make sure they know you're fired up. Make sure they know you support this. It'll only take 1,000 people, 2,000 max, who are fired up and are hitting up the emails, hitting up the Twitters, hitting up every social media outlet. Just blow these guys' information tracks up with Convention of States in Nebraska. Because if you do, it will pass there. I can assure you that. If you do, it will pass there. They were much more open to it this time around than they were even a month or so ago.
Yeah, and the good news is we've done a lot of work for you folks. So if you go to our website, if you go to thepatriotthinktank.com and you start filtering down and you get to the Convention of States, you're going to see a section there. Go into and find Nebraska. What section is that under again, George?
Nebraska is under the section of pending legislation.
Okay, so go under pending legislation, find Nebraska. Now, we've already found the representatives for you. We found contact information. I believe we've begun to have identify people that are in favor of and against. And really, it's the folks that are against this that we need to work on. So anybody that's out there in Nebraska listening to this, we need your help because it has to be done within your state. Constituents have to raise their voice. I don't think anybody from outside of the state really has any say in it, do they, George?
No, they don't. So it's all about Nebraska. It's all about Nebraskans getting out there and having their state represented and make sure that you guys are a part of this convention when it goes down. I don't care how long it takes, folks. The convention's going down. It's going to happen. So the question is going to be whether your state is involved in proposing amendments or whether your state is not. And there are very specific amendments being proposed. So it's not going to be an open, your state gets to throw in its own amendment. Doesn't work that way. All 34 states have to agree on what gets talked about, not what gets passed first. First, they got to agree on what gets talked about. And each one of these pieces of legislation, and they're all links to them all are state by state on the website. Each one has a clause saying exactly what their delegates are allowed to speak about. So Nebraska is good for all three. And that's a balanced budget amendment, government overreach with respect to regulatory agencies, and then term limits for Congress. All right. So those are the three that are the most popular. There are a couple of states who have done one, but not the other, or two, but not this one. But for the most part, those are the three that are passed by the majority of states. So all 15 that have already passed are all three.
And listen, if any of you folks are from Nebraska or know somebody from Nebraska that's an influencer, and you believe, as we do, that we should begin to limit the powers of the federal government, reach out to us. Go to our website, go to contact us. Any questions that you have, day or night, just shoot them over to us. We'll get on a conference call with you. We'll help you to form a plan to get organized to reach out to the folks in your state. And we'll arm you with a ton of information.
Absolutely. We can help you with you're going to hear some arguments against it. Our last episode, we debunked a lot of that stuff, a lot of junk arguments. What you're dealing with are Republicans who are afraid they're afraid, basically. They're afraid, what if something goes wrong? The blame is going to fall the blame. These are not leaders. These are sheep. These are people who are following and trying to play the game for nothing more than to keep their career going. So it's important to understand that. These are the type of people who don't understand the U.S. Constitution. They're in your state Senate. They don't understand how conventions work. They don't understand American history. These are Republicans, Democrats. It doesn't matter. Both sides of the aisle, no matter what side you're on, you need to be raging at your representative to get something done, to get the legislation through, get whatever resolution is in your state passed. Nebraska, ball's in your court right now. You've got until January. So get fired up.
Get fired up! Hey, George, why don't you give me just a little sneak peek on your rant today?
So, Jack, what's got me pissed off right now is Michael Yon, and he doesn't have me pissed off. He's brilliant, and I love the effort that he puts into his investigating. And you remember him from our piece on the Capitol riots. I used a small clip from his interview then, but he's a freelance war correspondent who's been all over the world. And right now, where he is, at least at the time, and I'll show some clips from this video from the interview, he was in Panama in a very small native village where the way he described it, to put it in perspective, was that they hunt with poisoned darts. Okay. So he's there. And the reason he's there is he's doing this whole piece on what it's actually like to go on the trek. And I believe his trek is starting in Guatemala. I could be off with it. It might be starting in Colombia. But the point is, he interviews and talks to actual people, not like these flaky videos you see with people in brand new kicks and, all the way, they've already reached Mexico and they're perfectly clean and fat and, no brand new backpacks and the whole nine. That ain't what these people look like. So there's a lot going on with it. The fact that it's not only not reported, but there's more issues with the reporting with the reporting in their home countries actually is about the United States and the border, and the lies they're being told has really got me fired up. And I had to do the rant on this piece.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to it. So rant away, George.
I'm fuming. Let's do it.
So it's a week-long trip, and the average person sees at least several people either die or dead.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
I don't want you to ride. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the streets. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
Is the whole world gone crazy? Am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rule?
You have the luxury of not knowing what I know.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
So this week, the conversation turns to a slightly different issue than what we've been covering in the past. Not that I've forgotten about any of that, CRT and all the other devilish stuff that our government is starting to do right now. But one of the things that they're doing is leaving the border suddenly wide open. So after years of criticizing Trump for the border, they've now created an immense crisis there, and I would dare to argue it is not by accident. The border's wide open. News is reporting in the home countries that have people fleeing and joining these caravans: Guatemala, Colombia, Haiti, Cuba. There's a wide list of places that people are coming from. And they generally, as you will see in a moment when I show you this clip from a very in-depth interview that was done with war correspondent Michael Yon. Okay, you might remember Michael. We briefly had one of his clips when he was discussing the Capitol riots. But in general, the man has been all over the world. He's been reporting from everywhere. He's been to Iraq, many places in the Middle East. He's been acclaimed by liberal and conservative publications alike. He's an independent guy, basically gets his story over to those who want it, which gives him the freedom to report as he wishes and not how he is told. Now, Michael Yon did an interview with Epoch Times, and they now have an Epoch Times television show or TV station. And I've been saying, you've heard me say many times before, Epoch Times is as legit as it gets when it comes to investigative reporting. And I don't believe Yon works directly for them. They just know that he's out there and he's as good as it gets. And right now, Yon is in Panama City, or at least during this interview, he was in Panama City. And he's been making his rounds. He started at Colombia and is working through the stops of one of the most deadliest trails that these caravans go through. And it's called the Darian Gap. Okay. The Darian Gap is just straight jungle. There is no path. There is no anything. It's raining all the time. It's full of mud. There's disease, all kinds of nasty stuff going on in there. And Michael tells the story from these people as they come out of there. He interviewed some. He spent some time in Colombia where it all begins. Then during this interview, he had made his next stop at Panama, which is on the other side of the Darian Gap. And he began interviewing people there. He has a very good hold on what's going on through these caravans. This isn't necessarily a sob story for the people coming over. However, hearing all this has made me look at things in a different light, and it kind of made me pissed off for a completely different reason. So these people, in the end, and you'll see this towards the end of the rant, are not told what they're getting into. And why they're not told is bizarre and insane, not unbelievable, unfortunately. The cartels are selling the trip as if there's going to be beds and stops and places that they go, as if the money that's being paid, because it is an exorbitant amount of money, as if it's going to pay for those types of accommodations. And when they begin the trip, they quickly realize that's not the case. So those who live through the jungle experience, which really is one of the first necks of the trip, find themselves in some villages with some natives and living conditions that, you know, for the natives that are used to it, are probably not considered that bad. For those that are not used to it, they describe it as bad as it gets. I mean, this is a culture that is still hunting with poison darts. This is just one stop, right? So there are other stops along the way. I'm sure by the time they get to Mexico, you know, I don't know where they're staying or if they have housing, but at least it's not in the middle, just, you know, jungle atmosphere. But they have no idea what they're getting into. People are being raped, beaten. They're robbed regularly. You'll hear from two guys that are trying to warn people not to make the journey, that all light-skinned women are getting raped. So Cubans, El Salvadorians, light-skinned Haitians, they said, almost all of them are being raped along the journey. Everyone is being robbed. Let's not get into the children. But then you think to yourself while you're watching it, why don't they know? So before I go on, let me give you some of the interview with Michael Yon. And this came from Epoch Times TV. Excellent job from Epoch Times. Again, I would put the link for this, but if you're not a subscriber to the Epoch Times, I am. You won't get this video. If they ever release it, you know, outside of subscription, I'll be more than happy to post it up. And if it ever hits YouTube, I will be most happy to post it up. However, right now I went to YouTube. There's nothing but the trailer for it. They know they want to get paid for their investigative reporting, and I don't necessarily blame them for that. So, you know, it's a cheap subscription. If you want to subscribe, you should anyway, only because their stories are breaking. They were a year ahead of the Wuhan lab situation that the media is now acting like is breaking news, when in reality, they were just calling those reporting it conspiracy theorists when it was coming out new. But here's some from Michael Yon. Let me not keep going.
I'm very excited to have with us investigative journalist and prolific war correspondent Michael Yon, direct from Panama. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I'm in Panama City now. I've left the Darian Gap for now. Just got back from a trip deep inside the jungle.
Could you just start by orienting us a little bit? What is the Darian Gap? Why did you go there?
Right. I've spent 3 months here so far in Panama and another almost 2 weeks in Colombia on the other side of the Darian Gap. The Darian Gap, if you pull out a map, you'll see there's the Darian Isthmus, which is the Panama Isthmus, that little spit of land between Central America and South America. So the northernmost country in South America is Colombia, right? So extracontinental migrants, they've come in from Africa, Asia, and some from Europe. They'll fly into Ecuador usually, or Brazil mostly. There's a couple of other places, but those are where most of them go through. Very dangerous in there. I would say, based on the many interviews over the last three and a half months, I would say about 10% actually die. So it's a very high number. I've heard other people say only 1% or whatever. They're completely wrong. It depends on which route they take. If they take the hard route, it's going to be probably 10% or more actually die. And almost everybody comes out with some sort of injuries, disease, haven't eaten for a week, that sort of thing. So basically between Yavitsa, Panama and Turbo, Colombia, there is a gap of jungle that's about 66 miles where there's no road, right? And this is some of the wildest jungle in the world. Not all jungles are created equally, trust me. I've been in a lot of them. This one is particularly bad. It's also very biologically active. Yellow fever is endemic. Huge numbers of people out there have malaria. There's flash floods that kill tons of people. I don't mean every once in a while. I mean, last week, there was a group of 20 people from Senegal and 10 were dead. At least one was a flash flood. At least one fell off of a cliff. And we don't know how the other 8 died, but that was what the Senegalese people said. A lot of them just get lost. I mean, they just vanish. We don't really know how many go in because I've been on the Colombia side researching that. Think about that. So it's a week-long trip, and the average person sees at least several people either die or dead.
Almost everyone that they've talked to has either seen dead bodies or has just sat there and watched people die. Okay, his estimate was 10% of the people that go through don't make it out of that jungle area. And that he's saying other people are estimating 1%. If you haven't been, I'm going to go with his 10 because he's there and he's talking to these people and he's having the conversation with a group of 20 that are now a group of 10 as they exit the jungle and telling the stories of what happened to these people. I understand the argument. Don't leave then. Don't leave. That was always my argument. I always looked at this when I see children coming across the U.S. border that are from like Colombia or somewhere far away. I say to myself, what parent in their right mind would send their child with human smugglers? What parent in their right mind would do that? It's just so asinine. It's not like these countries, Venezuela, maybe. Okay, Venezuela is a situation where perhaps asylum is necessary. Okay, that really is out of control bad and incredibly dangerous. Thank you, socialism, for that one. For all you socialists out there and Marxists, they're all fleeing that place and they're willing to walk through jungles, completely untamed jungles, at the risk of disease, eaten by an animal, whatever the situation may be, raped, beaten, robbed, but it's better than being in Venezuela. Because that's what socialism leads to. But I digress. The fact is this interview continues, and Michael goes on to explain, give examples and really get into some detail about some of the things that go on. And he also gets into detail because the interviewer asks him, well, why do they still come? Don't they know? Don't they know that it's what goes on? And his answer was no, they don't. And the reason is the reporting that goes on in their home countries doesn't talk about this. It doesn't have this conversation. I believe he called CNN, he accused CNN of putting up infomercials to come to the United States because all they report on is how porous the border is, how many people are coming over, and basically, without saying it, telling people this is the time. This is when you want to make your move. There are no news stories about the people that are raped in the jungle and all that. The cartels are running these areas. They're not getting that information. These parents, many of them probably think they sent their kids, they saved up, 30 grand, whatever it may be, saved it up, gave it to these guys, and they think for 30 grand, my kid's going to be safe. That's not the case. That's not the case. People are being raped in mass order on the way across that jungle, and I'm sure throughout most of that journey. Let's hear what else Michael Yon had to offer.
But what we do know from the many, many interviews is that the people that we do find who come out, if we ask them, did you see anybody die or any dead people? Almost every one of them will say that they saw somebody die or dead. One guy recently, a few days ago, said he saw 16 dead. He was counting as he came through. And so that's one man said he saw 16, which is, par for the course.
I have so many questions, but I want to go back to the journey through the Darien Pass, because everything you described was sort of the natural hazards that you encounter, but there's a lot of human ones too, as I understand from your reporting.
A lot. They say all the light-skinned women, all the pretty women, especially Haitians and Cuban women, almost all are raped, almost all of them, and or killed. And so robbed, almost everybody is robbed. If you take the long route, your chance of being raped and robbed or killed is significant, mostly raped and robbed. So that's another hazard. So you've got all the other things like yellow fever and cholera and flash floods that are sweeping a lot of people away, those flash floods. A lot of people that haven't come from jungle or, let's say, mountainous environments that are rainy and with sudden rains, they don't know the dynamics of flash floods. And they don't seem to realize the water doesn't really rise very slowly. It comes with a rumble. And you might get 15 minutes of warning if you know what you're listening for. And if it's at midnight, if it's at midnight, you might hear a roar, or maybe not. Maybe it's raining very hard, and then suddenly you're gone. Women are being encouraged to either bring children or to come pregnant, because that's their golden ticket to get through all these places and finally get into the United States, is to be pregnant. The people that are entering the Darien Gap, almost none of them realize what they're getting into. Almost every single one, when they get to the other side, if they live, will just they'll use words like it was hell.
La verdad les voy a decir a ustedes, la travesía no es fácil. Hay muertos, hay niños violados, nos atracan. En realidad no es bueno para todo inmigrante que quieran pasar por esa selva. Se lo estoy diciendo de pana.
No lo recomiendes, no
lo
crucen,
recomiendo.
No crucen porque allá viven las mujeres. Mujeres blancas las violan. No crucen, por allá no se puede cruzar.
Nos atracan, nos violan.
Las violan hombres y mujeres.
I was actually going to ask if people know what they're getting into, because I saw also in your reporting that 16-year-old sister and a 12-year-old brother from Haiti who looked so, happy and confident and excited almost to go through. You were talking to them on the Colombian side.
So we've been tracking Medice and her 12-year-old brother, Miguel, and her mother step by step. She sent pictures back of her and her brother, and they're thin as a rail now. And they were quite, beefy kids like American kids before they went in. And so now they're quite skinny, actually. And so it's very rough. If you're a super athlete in the dry season, you might do it in 4 days if you're a Superman. Other people are taking, 6 days to, 2 weeks. One guy just took 22 days, and that was an epic story.
How is it that they aren't getting the message isn't, making it back before they make the journey that this is pure hell?
Well, you can see CNN doing basically infomercials.
CNN in Spanish on the TV at the hotel here. And this is something you see all the time across Latin America. Spanish CNN is essentially an infomercial for illegal immigration. They're doing a massive report on the new administration's policy change today to give temporary protected status to Venezuelans. And it's saying right here that it will benefit 320,000 Venezuelans. That means there's that many in the United States right now, but that's not going to be for long, because there are millions of Venezuelans right now that are watching CNN in Spanish, and they're saying, I want to be next. One of the other things I've seen in Latin America, I saw in Nicaragua, was CNN basically making a report that looked like an infomercial about how to migrate illegally to the United States and which cities would welcome you with open arms when you get there, sanctuary cities. And they had a list of them so that you would know as a Latino exactly where to go once you got into the United States. This is how CNN is assisting irregular migration, and it's straight up propaganda.
You feeling me? Now do you understand why this became a part of a rant? It's that last piece. I really couldn't have given the impact without going through the true, real deal, nitty gritty tales of what it is that these people are going through when they make that decision to leave and make a run for the United States. Now, a lot of the countries they're leaving, yeah, they're not as well off as the United States, but with the exception of Venezuela, they're not exactly the socialist cesspools that people would be seeking asylum from for personal risk. However, the culprit here, I think at this point you should understand pretty well. So these people have no idea what they're getting into. The CNN report there on the rape and on the murder and the people that are dying for other reasons, such as, flash floods and disease. I mean, I don't have the whole thing up, but he talks about people having their feet cut off because they show up out of the jungle with such severe gangrene that there's no hope but to cut their foot off. Does any of that get mentioned in CNN's advertising? And he gave the examples of Nicaragua. No, they don't. They don't. What they report on there is that we have a new administration now. We have a new administration, one that's much more open to taking you in. It'll be wonderful for Venezuelans, right? It was Venezuela and Nicaragua are the two examples that this gentleman personally spoke of. But you can bet that it's going on in Guatemala, in El Salvador, in Colombia, and all over Central America. You can guarantee that. Okay, I guarantee you they're not showing Epoch Times in Guatemala or in Nicaragua. Because CNN is the world's mouthpiece for bullshit. That's what they are. And the reality of the matter is right now, they're encouraging people to go on that trek that you just heard about. They're pumping them up. They're firing, not only encouraging them, but they're encouraging them to give up their life savings to put themselves at risk in this way. It's despicable. It's an all-time new low for mainstream media. It's not bad enough that they spend all day pumping garbage into our heads. We're smart enough at this point, when you look at their ratings, it's pretty clear. We're smart enough at this point to disregard them and know where they're coming from. But if you don't live in this country and you weren't raised here and you haven't seen all this bull crap come up the pipe, and you're in your own country where you know that it's like blatant propaganda on the news, you're looking elsewhere for it. And many of these people think U.S. news is the place to go, as crazy as that sounds. So they look to CNN to try and get an idea of what's going on in the world. And this is what they get. This is what they get. A humanitarian crisis encouraged and egged on not only by the administration and their bizarre, really, it's not even a policy. I don't even think Biden knows where the border is and how the whole thing works. I don't even think he understands it at this point. But somebody does. Whoever his handlers are, whoever it is that props him up in front of the podium before the cameras go on, they know. And there's no other excuse except that it's intentional. There's no way anyone really believes that this open border madness is good for anyone. You can sit and ponder and come up with your theories as to what the motives are, but whatever they are, whoever ends up being right in the end, they're not good, and they're not in your best interest. That I can guarantee you. Rant over.
And like that, he's gone.
Hey, George, I'm going to open up the VIP chat line. Let's take a call.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Here we go. Windows opening now.
Can't wait to see who this one is.
Oh, hello there, AOC. Please say hi to our viewers.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, AOC.
Hey, she's in the kitchen right now. What are you doing in the kitchen?
So I have kind of a salmon cream pasta situation that actually shouldn't take super long to make. Feel free to pop in with your questions.
Excellent. Well, you know, I've always wanted to know, when you first got to Congress, what was the first thing that went through your mind?
So I use my special interest dark money funded campaign to pay off folks that I need to pay off and get elected. So now I'm elected, now I'm in. I've got the power to draft, lobby, and shape the laws that govern the United States of America.
I see. Well, what was the first thing that you looked into to take advantage of your new power?
Are there any limits on the laws that I can write or influence, especially if I'm based on the special interest funds that I accepted to finance my campaign and get me elected in the first place?
Well, after you took care of paying off George Soros and, of course, surviving the Capitol riot, what's your end game?
Last thing I want to do is get rich with as little work possible.
Amen to that, sister.
I'm telling you. Can you give me an example of how a Congress member can do that?
So is there anything preventing me from holding stocks, say, in an oil or gas company, and then writing laws to deregulate that industry and cause, you know, that could potentially cause the stock value to soar and accrue a lot of money in that time?
Huh. Wow.
I mean, inside
So,
trading.
yeah. Well, if you can do that with your power, I mean, Joe must be having just a field day, huh?
It's already super legal, as we've seen, for me to be a pretty bad guy. So it's even easier for the president of the United States to be one.
Whew.
There's truth in
Well,
that.
enough of the dark side. I heard you tried to reach across the aisle to Republicans. What did that message sound like?
I'm trying, and you're not. So until you do it, I'm the boss.
Ooh.
Well, that's it for today. Hey, by the way, I heard that you do a great impression of Crazy Nancy saying goodbye after happy hour. Can you do that for our audience?
Bye, everyone.
I guess that was perfect. You're so cute. See you later.
Wow, Jack, man, these people, I tell you, for everybody that you get on here, I mean, you know, I've seen their interviews with other journalists and such, and they're just comfortable with you, man. They just get open with you. I mean, she just laying it out there like you guys are, you know, you guys are boys forever.
Well, you know, I think that has to do with my my background. I've spent a lot of time in a bar, and I think she has as well.
And she is a bartender, so hey.
She is, isn't she?
All right, Jack. So Fauci's emails dropped this week or last week. Big deal. Everybody, you know, making a huge deal about it. I think to most people that are minded in the way of questioning things in the first place are not exactly stunned by it. There are some people who are still diehard and running to their fact check sites to try and debunk whatever's in there, and it's not whatever's in there. There's about 3,000 emails. They're all available. You can download them all off our website. As soon as you go on, you get a pop-up. I couldn't not put them on the website. So if you want to sift through them, you can. I think it's easier to do what I did, and that's download all the emails, watch a few news reports to get some opinions and some focus, and take advantage of their research teams that have read through them all. And then when they mention one in particular, Control F and find it. and now you've got the email, and you can read it for yourself and make sure that what you're watching matches with the reality, right? That they're not deleting anything.
And I think, you know, you're right. I don't think people were surprised
Yeah.
Or at least a lot of folks that run in our circles. I think, if anything, they were pleased that this information came to light. And one of the things that I in some ways goes without saying, but when he delves into the mask portion of it and how dismissive he is in the use of a mask,
Yeah.
and yet what do we see? People still running around here in California with a mask. I mean, I could
Not
go
just
into a
California,
store.
it's all over the country. There's no reason. I mean, and when I say like 6 months ago, I was saying there's no reason to wear one. But then I understood if people wanted to be like, no, you need to wear one, and here's why, and whatever. But like now, everyone, like the CDC, WA, like everyone is saying, please cut it out, and they're still wearing masks. And I think there's something deeply psychological in that I'm probably not qualified to fully discuss, but like clearly it's a version of herd mentality where they're not going to take it off until they start seeing a lot of people taking it off. Now, you can identify the wolves in any supermarket, though. You absolutely can. Like when you walk in, I know your wife's been walking everywhere without one, and I have been going everywhere without one, and I'm picking my spots and going to places that don't make me wear them. And as just kind of a thank you to them for not making me wear it. And when you go through these places, you could see in the corner of your eye, there'll be someone who looks at you and sees you talk to an employee and nobody say anything, and they just take theirs off.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, because it tells you, what it tells you is they're only wearing it because they think they have to get their groceries. Like they're so used to it. And the businesses that are still on this kick, and there are still quite a few out there, I think, where, and I think there's mixed communication between the employees. Are they still supposed to be mask Nazis, or can they let that go now? And, and there's still some confusion. So people wear them, but when they see someone not wearing it and not being messed with, they're like, oh, hell no. They just take it off.
Yeah, it's time to empower each other, because that ship has sailed.
So Fauci puts out this email, and he basically says on the email, the typical mask you buy in a drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus, which is small enough to pass through the material. It might, however, provide some slight benefit in keeping out gross droplets. And like, this is all stating the obvious, which was obvious to everyone until Fauci decided to start jumping on board because the CDC said everyone should wear masks. And Fauci, knowing better, just jumped on board with the CDC and then had to explain his previous comments. And then it's just like, look, you've been doing this since I'm a kid, right? Like Fauci's been dealing with viruses and diseases since I'm a child. This is the 80s. He was the guy leading the AIDS pandemic. I don't know if they consider that an epidemic or a pandemic, but he was the one leading the charge for that. He's been in charge of one major organization or another all the way up through his career to now. There's no way that he's wishy-washy on an issue like masks, right? There's no way. Like, he knows. And he was saying it up front in the very beginning, it's not going to do anything, folks. I think the one interview that he said, he was quoted as saying, look, if it'll make you feel better, which really is all it is. That's all it is. And everyone in their heart of hearts knows that. It's just that people have this need to pretend like like they want to feel like they're empowered to fight back in some way. Like they don't understand the truth about epidemics and the way these pandemics work. And when a virus gets out like that, in a situation like this where it's around for months, thanks to China, and the WHO bowing to China, and our media bowing to China, they're telling us what we can and can't call the virus and all this. All of this kowtowing and bowing down caused 2 to 3 month delay. There was no prayer of finding the original, patient zero. There was no prayer. And we now know that it was a few employees at a Wuhan lab, which Epoch Times broke a long time ago. And that too got squashed and called crazy conspiracy theory. But the herd mentality was crazy. He clearly says in the email, and this is why we're not shocked because we've been saying it forever, but he clearly says in the email that they're not effective, and it is what it is, right?
There was a lot of psychological tools being deployed on people as well. I mean, even if we go back to the piece we did on CNN, the CNN director talking about how they continually put up the death toll numbers, and when they took it down,
which were
their
completely
viewership went down.
fabricated as well.
I'm sorry?
And the death toll numbers were completely fabricated as well. Like no one has anyone who tells you a death toll number is full of shit. And I don't care if it's the current head of the CDC. I don't care if it's the president. I don't care if it's the greatest virologist ever to walk the earth. There's no effing way for them to know how many people died from COVID because the count was such a hot mess and the incentives that were out there and, doctors and surgeons, et cetera, all over the place, clearly stating before they get, banished from the internet forever, but clearly stating that they're encouraged to label COVID deaths because the hospitals are bringing in more money for it. And the hospitals at that time were desperate for money because these are a lot of seniors coming in. It's mostly seniors. And as a result, it's mostly Medicare. And they're getting a 20% bump. That's what it was. It was a 20% bump in fees if someone, if you're dealing with a COVID issue. And the same went for calling them dead. Like the same word for that.
Plus, they were holding back on doing what the non-essential operations. I fell into that bucket, and I had to wait 6 months, and so they're losing revenue as a result of that.
Right, you're not going to go in there and get your nasal passages cleared or whatever, or some elective surgery while this thing's going on. You're walking into you're being told you're in the land of the zombies. All right, my nose can wait, whatever. That wart on my foot they were going to remove, that can wait, and people don't realize hospitals make a lot of money off of that stuff. So it's that elective surgery that really is where the money is. The people that are coming in, dying and stuff, those are usually drains on expenses because they're usually, the cost of the care becomes so expensive that most insurance can't cover it all, most people can't pay it all, and they end up getting screwed in the end. So when they see a 20% lift in everybody that's coming in the door, I don't even blame them really. Like I don't even blame them in that sense. Like they should have the way that should have been approached was, look, we'll get, because it's true, they should get some kind of grant with that kind of overwhelming, service. I mean, they're working 24 hours a day. That no one's, nurses are working 3 days straight, 18, 19 hours a day. I get that. Like, I'm okay with giving them some kind of financial grant, but you can't line it up with the patients. Like, you can't be like per case. Because like anything else you subsidize, right? Anything else, whenever you subsidize something, you get more of it. So if you want to subsidize COVID deaths, you're going to get more COVID deaths, right? And of course, the flu magically disappeared and had one of its best years ever. I went and looked up the chart. It was all in the green. I'm like, wow, what an awesome thing for the flu this COVID was, huh? It really did clear the world of the flu.
It went from 60,000 cases in 2015. Granted, that was a high year, but it was around 8,000 cases in 2020. So
right,
that's a huge difference.
Yeah, pneumonia is down, heart conditions are down, like heart disease is down. Death to everything is down because of COVID. And because of that, I'm not claiming that I know the number and it's this much less. I'm just making the clear statement, the obvious statement, that nobody has any friggin' all we know is the number's lower than what they reported. That's all we know. Right. How much lower? Who the hell? I would say it's significantly lower, but exactly how much lower? Who the hell knows? Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
I know.
So the whole thing is like worthless now to even talk about because every number you use is fictitious.
Before we were talking a little bit about the psychological impact on people with wearing of the mask, but I think the greater travesty is the fact that we had preventative medication that was made available in previous semi-epidemics, and it was made available. It's been available. It's been backed by the CDC and Dr. Fauci because he came out years ago and he stood behind a product called hydrochloroquine. The fact of the matter is that we have had something that's been available And when people go into the hospital and they're ill, they're told to leave, go home, see if you get better. Who does that with pneumonia? It doesn't happen, right?
Right.
But they're sending people back to their homes. And if you get bad enough, come back. Well, by the time they get bad enough, now they really have to struggle to find a treatment to help these people. If they would have treated them immediately with either hydrochloroquine or ivermectin, there are studies from all around the world that show that this works. Hell, there are even countries that are using it. And by the way, before we get away from this, and I know you have a lot to say on it, I want folks to know that the people responsible for bringing it out in a big way were the frontline doctors. And there's been a lot of clips. Some of you folks may have seen them. If not, we'll reference it on the website.
Yeah, they don't look so crazy now, right?
No, they
Everyone wanted to make fun of that Nigerian lady and ignored everybody else in the friggin' in the thing.
I just want people to know that they can get ivermectin and they can get hydrochloroquine by visiting frontline doctors. Get your hands on something, use it as a prophylactic. Hell, Trump did. Whether you like Trump or not, that should have been a sign.
Yeah. So the CDC, so, you know, and Jack, you know this already, and anyone who follows me on Facebook knows that while the pandemic was going on, I was absolutely apeshit about hydrochloroquine. Because here's the thing, right? There's no harm in hydrochloroquine. So the fake study that got put out and published in the Lancet of all places, which, by the way, you know, Lancet is was one of the most respected journals out today, and has now been a part of at least 2 or 3, you know, questionable studies that they've published. This one in particular, though, had to be retracted because it was claiming that hydrochloroquine was actually causing heart issues and other factors that, you know, that could be fatal. And the reality was the entire study was bogus. Eventually, doctors caught on to the study. They started questioning it. They were demanding to see numbers. It was a very vague piece done, and it was peer-reviewed, though, by Lancet, which puts them on the hook. And the reality is they pulled it because the reality, they were using more hydrochloroquine per person. The doses that they were giving people, it would be analogous to saying Tylenol can kill you. We ran a study where we had 700 subjects take 12 bottles of Tylenol, and they took this every morning. And after 6 weeks, they showed significant issues with, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, that's because they took 10 bottles a day. Like, that's not how the drug is taken.
Right.
And there's more cryptic shit. I got really deep into this. So this was like this kind of opened my eyes to things, because that was the moment I realized Fauci was lying, right? Because that drug was so safe. On the CDC's website, there's a frequently asked question sheet that's up, and it did circulate Facebook a little while. I actually found it on my own. And it's basically people that are about to travel to certain African countries that have serious malaria issues. They're generally recommended that they take hydrochloroquine before they go, because it's a great weapon against malaria when taken as a prophylaxis, meaning when taken before you come encounter something. And the questions on the sheet entail, who is it not safe for? And the answer, people with sclerosis.
Right.
That's it. One sentence. People with sclerosis. Who is it safe for? Pregnant women, infants, elderly, like everybody. So the question then becomes, and I know you were saying, like, well, why didn't they give this to them as a treatment when they came in the hospital? Knowing what Fauci knows and knowing what the medical community knows, why was hydrochloroquine not being sent to nursing homes all over the country, regardless if they were positive or not, and just having them go on a regimen of hydrochloroquine?
Right. We could have nipped this thing right in the bud. And I want our viewers to know something as well. There's a site on YouTube. It's called Trial Site News. Put that into YouTube. Again, Trial Site News. Now, they're suppressing this guy's views. And when I say views, I mean the views of the material that he's shooting.
I wouldn't know what that's like.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, we can't even boost the post. But the fact of the matter is that he has very very specific presentations and information from all across the world on the trials that are being conducted. He can point you to all the sources. It is outstanding. It's an outstanding piece of information. So when they say trust the science, this guy is bringing science to you, and there's no politics involved. And that was the problem that we have. It wasn't a pandemic on its own. It was a political issue that really drove it to become out of control.
It's just completely and morally wrong. And when I watched Fauci doing interviews about hydrochloroquine, there was one moment where he made the comment, there are multiple studies done all around the world. And I'm like, all around the world. So I started looking up studies, right? So at the time he said this, there were 4 studies on hydrochloroquine that were fairly recent. 3 of them were in the United States. 1 of them was in the UK. I was not aware of the UK one prior. That's why I went back and looked again, and I found the one from the UK. So the one from the UK, so now technically he told the truth, right? He said that there were multiple studies done all around the world. Well, okay, so UK is on the other side. So, all right, they're across the pond. Technically, you could stretch and go, all right, that's all around the world. That wasn't the issue, though. The issue was these studies showed no effect. So at this point, the Lancet study had already been pulled. He did make a comment during those 2 weeks that it can be dangerous and he did it during those 2 weeks. And that's what that was all about. Get this in the Lancet study. Let the media go absolutely crazy. I remember watching Neil Cavuto be like, it will kill you. And I was just like, oh my God. And they get that 2 weeks, the media goes nuts, and then they pull the study and the media reports it in a buried, and only in the print media, and then it's like in the bottom footnote of a page nobody ever reads. Right. So he says 4 studies were done, and his claim was that these studies did not show any impact of hydrochloroquine on COVID-19. So I'm like, that's interesting, because there are tons of anecdotal data out there. Not like, oh, well, this is a few people, that could be a fluke. No, there are like thousands and thousands of people. But all of Nigeria had no pandemic. There was no COVID-19. And there are about 5 other countries in that area of Africa that did not suffer a pandemic at all. Some people got infected, but not many. And the reason is they take hydrochloroquine there like candy. This is how a lot of people first caught on to the hydrochloroquine piece, even though there were studies done in the past, because those countries that take it for malaria anyway didn't really get affected by COVID. So then it became a thing that people were prescribing because it's so safe that it's almost like saying Tylenol or aspirin will fight the disease. Well, would you not just take it proactively if you knew that aspirin had a chance of fighting the disease? Like, of course you would. So
just so people know, malaria is an upper respiratory issue.
Right.
So that
works the same way with the spike protein and goes. And the thing is, like, just not to get too wonky, but hydrochloroquine works because it when it gets inside the cell, it reduces the acidity of the cell. And the cell, with the cell being more of a base than acidic, the spike protein can't latch on. And that's why it only works as a prophylaxis. You can't take it after you're deep into COVID-19 and your lungs are crystallizing. You can't take it at that point.
Then it's no good.
And that brings me back to the point about Fauci, though, is that all 4 studies that were done in that phase. Like, you didn't even have to read the whole study. You just go straight to the conclusion and they break it down for you. That all the patients were in an advanced stage. And immediately it's like, okay, well, then of course it's not going to show any effect. Like, no one was ever making the argument that it's not a cure, right? And this is where the Nigerian doctor in that first responders group screwed up. Because she went ahead and came out and started saying things like that. Like, there is a cure, and there's not a cure.
Right.
And it's okay if a layman says mistakes that and says there's a cure. But it's not okay if you're going to go out there in a lab coat and say there's a cure, or a medical jacket and say that there's a cure. Like, you got to be able to parse. Like, I didn't even necessarily have a problem with the left tearing that lady to pieces. They never should have brought that lady onto the.
She went too far. She went
Yeah,
too far.
and her history was a hot mess. Like, they had to know they were going to get attacked, and what she did was she debunked all the other doctors, and no one would even look at the other doctors, because every article the next morning in Google, after they shut these guys down from the internet for 2 days, including their website, got attacked. Like, shut the whole operation down to give the article writers, the bloggers, time to write articles. And when they did, that's what they wrote about. Everything was about her. All you got was the sheep going, ha, ha, ha. Well, what is she using? Voodoo? Ha, ha, ha. She did this. She did that. She did. And like, no one bothered with the whole rest of the 4 or 5 hour presentation they did to explain why it's effective. It's disgusting.
Here's the other part of it. So, we talked about Fauci's emails. We talked about the fact that there's in the mask. So we talked about the fact that there was a prophylactic or something that can treat it in the early stages.
Prophylaxis. Prophylactic would have everyone with the runs.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, but so what was the real big issue with COVID-19? The big issue with COVID-19 is not that it wasn't treatable. It's not that it was totally deadly. It was mismanaged, and the big issue has to do with what's called gain of function. It was manufactured to be easily transferable from person to person. It's highly contagious.
And Fauci's trying He's trying to claim plausible deniability on the money that was given through his branch, through his department, to $600,000, I believe it was, to the Wuhan lab, and his claim was, well, they were just supposed to be doing not gain of function research, which gain of function, folks, is how you make it compatible to humans. So it's basically changing it from a virus that could not infect humans and engineering it to be able to do something like that. That's called gain of function research. You're adding a function to the virus. Okay. And the reality of him trying to say, well, I didn't know. What do you mean you didn't know? Right? Like, that's so dumb. It's such an insult to my intelligence. It's like, we're talking about the CCP, for Christ's sakes. You think there's no reason, there's the whole idea that, oh, well, they have the bats native there and this and that. That doesn't mean a damn thing. There's no reason that samples could not be taken back to the United States and that money could have been spent doing the research we intended here. You don't let a psycho Nazi country like that, government like that, that's killing people by the thousands, and you don't let them. You don't pay them to do research. I mean, China's got money. It ain't like they're dying for this $600,000. Like, they could have they could have bucked up their own $600,000. There's no reason to friggin' do that.
Yeah.
It's so disingenuous. It's ridiculous. And the emails bring that out as well.
Yeah. Well, and then especially you consider that in 2015, there was a paper put out by the Chinese scientific community in conjunction with their army, and what they did was they stated how they could use SARS through gain of function to become a biological weapon.
They were putting out the lady that was working on it, her name is escaping me right now. She put out journals while she was working on this and doing the research years ago.
Yeah, Li Mingyang.
Li Mingyang, correct. Publishing them in medical journals, where other doctors were like criticizing, like, why on earth would you need to do this research? Like, what knowledge are you going to gain by weaponizing basically a virus that is not a harm right now, by making it harmful? Why do you even want to prove that you can do that? Like, that's crazy. But yet she did, and this was all the evidence presented by Epoch Times when they did their piece back in April of last year, because they are like the China watchdogs. Like, these dudes they're a year ahead of China on just about, like, whatever China starts doing today, they know about today. There's no like they're so embedded in there because they started in China. That was where they fled to come here, and they've never stopped staying up China's butt. And the CCP hates them. They've got offices there that are continuously getting bombed. They got to move them all the time, and they keep relocating and popping up somewhere else. CCP finds them, place gets raided, all their equipment gets destroyed. It's like a constant cat and mouse that's going on down there. But they still have more contacts down there than any media organization on earth, than any. And that's why they came out with that in April, because they know who to call. They know who to go to. They've got inside people all over China that are willing to give them information. So whereas our journalists can't even get a foot in the door.
Yeah.
Theirs have like friends that are in the middle of all this stuff. So anyway, it's a great episode to watch. I posted it on the Facebook page of our last week's episode. So if you do want to check out that video from Epoch Times, and of course Facebook tagged it as being partly false, even though it's all been validated now, but whatever. So in the end, you can go and check it out and see for yourself. That came out last April. So let that blow your mind that came out last April and change the way you think of the Epoch Times, because people now, they don't like mainstream media, but then the only investigative reporting you get are from the smaller guys. And every time it's a smaller guy, they're like, oh, who's that? Like, how about you just take a look at what he's presenting? And then if you want, you can go and validate it, but like, don't just blow him off. If he's saying something serious and he's showing you evidence to prove it, check his evidence, but don't just dismiss him and be like, oh, well, it's almost like people are saying, we don't trust the mainstream media. Oh, but we don't trust you because you're not as big as the mainstream media. So now you're just going to sit there stupid because you won't take information from anyone.
Like, a lot of people want somebody to tell them what and how to think, and that's what the mainstream media has been good for years. Now people are realizing that what they've been told to think and how to think is incorrect, but they've been conditioned not to do their own research and looking into things. It doesn't matter who tells you what. I don't care who it is. Look into what they say. Approach everything like everybody has.
I don't know why more people don't. But even if you didn't throughout most of your life, like, now is not a time. That's a luxury that you had. Like, that's not a luxury that people have today.
Not anymore.
Because now the stuff is getting creepy. Now now they're purging military members. They're lying about pandemics. They're lying about cures and treatments and whatever. There's just so much lying about such serious stuff that it's beyond creepy at this point.
Yeah, it's time to get serious.
Race theory getting pumped into schools. Like, there's clearly something big going on. And this is not a time to be playing everybody's a conspiracy theorist crap.
All right. Well, you know what, George? We've been at this for a little bit now. We could probably go on for hours.
For sure.
Why don't we pull the plug on this one and move on?
Hold on, pulling the plug.
You know, George, I'm glad we're done with that segment. It's just so frustrating to me to see so many people that, don't do the research on that issue, and they just seem to be clueless.
You know why that is? You know why they know not? You know why they have this problem?
Why?
Because they don't know jack.
There are two ways to amend the Constitution. One is through Congress, the other through a convention of states. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, there is one amendment that seems to unify citizens, both Republican and Democrat. That amendment is imposing term limits on Congress. There are currently various versions of this amendment proposed in Congress. They're going to fail. Today, I'm going to show you why, and do my best to inspire you to join us to call for a convention of states. We'll start this journey on our website, the Patriot Think Tank. Let's enter the tank. Now, click on Action Civics. Then scroll down and click on Bills and Resolutions. I'll scroll down to find what I want. This is it. HJ stands for House Judiciary Committee, and this is resolution number 12. Let's click on it. As you can see, there's an overview, a summary page, full details, the text of the resolution, and a study guide. For our purposes, we'll go to the details page to identify what committee this has been assigned to. We can also determine if this is a bipartisan resolution, if it is largely supported by one political party only. That information is key. When we scroll down, we find that the resolution is owned by a subcommittee. By clicking on that subcommittee, you find that the members are not listed. A quick search on DuckDuckGo led me here. There are 12 members on the committee, 7 of which are Democrats, including both the committee chairman and vice chairman. When we consider that this bill is sponsored by the Republican Party, given the division between the parties, the likelihood that this resolution will make it to Congress for a vote is not favorable. Now, if you're willing to throw a Hail Mary, just for the hell of it, then you can go after them on social media and take your best shot. I've never had a Twitter account, and I never wanted one, but I signed up for one anyway. I'm using it, and its highly biased format, to turn it to my advantage. I wrote out my case for a convention of states and added the handle of the politicians. It'll be interesting to see if anybody replies. Regardless, we the people have little choice but to unite and call for a convention of states. I know there are millions of you out there. I see you complaining on social media every day. It's time to stop talking and take action. Okay, I'm done. So the next time someone tells you Congress will reduce their own power and that a convention of states won't be necessary, remember what I just showed you and be absolutely positive. They don't know jack.
That's the fact, Jack! That's a fact, Jack!
All right, folks. I hope you had a great time. I know we had a lot of fun working on this show. We're still having a lot of fun putting these shows up. You know, we do need your help. We would love for you to subscribe if you like the content, if you like the mission that we're on. Help us out. It don't cost you anything. Just subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and we're good. Follow us on Facebook. Oh, wait. Isn't there somewhere else that you can follow us now? Jack?
I think they can follow us on MeWe and Rumble now.
That is correct. So we are on MeWe right now. We post our videos via Rumble to MeWe, but we are on MeWe. We did create a page there. We are working now to start to get to know the community and try and get ourselves out there and try and get our message out there, both for taking action, fighting against critical race theory, convention of states as far as the action plan is concerned. We're definitely, you know, if you're like-minded, if you believe in some of the things that we're talking about and you like the show, follow us on MeWe. We're definitely brand new to the social network of MeWe. So if you're on MeWe, check us out, the Patriot Think Tank. Much appreciated.
With that said, have a great day, folks.
Au revoir.
Au revoir, George.